We are now deep in the bowels of the pandemic. Many of us thought that it would be different by now, that we would be in a different place with a different set of givens. It was a matter of paying the necessary price, imposing limits, wearing a mask, getting vaccinated, and taking things seriously. We now have to face a different set of limits, our inability to persuade our fellow citizens to act in a way that protects us all. The great frustration is that nothing seems to work. Whatever the message, whoever the preacher, we don't seem to be getting through the barriers. The result is a deeper sense of division and the fact that many more people are dying. The hospitals of our community are now bursting with patients, and medical personnel are struggling to keep up. Many of us feel that we are back at square one, that with the arrival of yet another variant, we will be back to washing our canned goods and our cereal boxes. But even at a moment like this one, it's important to acknowledge our heroes and healthcare warriors, the people who have worked for a year and a half to protect us from the ravages of an international pandemic and speak the truth about illness and its source. I am personally grateful to the developers of the vaccines that helped free us from the overhang of crippling fear. Others ramped up production of protective clothing so that we could go out in public with less anxiety. Our doctors and nurses and medical professionals tended to the sick, the dying, and the dead with enormous tenderness and profound humanity. They will look back at this period with a sense of exhaustion and justifiable pride, with many losses along the way, including the lives of medical professionals themselves. They continue to deal with their gargantuan caseloads and the Herculean task of caring for people who have not always done what they could to protect themselves. We salute all of these people, along with educators, policymakers, agency heads, and institutional directors who did everything they could to ensure our safety. And the same for frontline workers in every field, from grocery store stockers to pizza delivery folk, who kept us moving from day to day with a minimum of disruption and no small degree of comfort. I feel a debt of gratitude that far exceeds my frustration. So many people have demonstrated courage and self-sacrifice that it makes the willfully unvaccinated recede from consideration. For all of these reasons, we are ready to dedicate a plaque that will permanently record the gratitude of our congregation. We are not done with the pandemic yet, but we know more than we did at the beginning of this crisis, and we have been benefited in uncountable ways by people who rose to the occasion of our distress. Even if we have months to go, it is never too early to express our thanks and acknowledge the leadership of so many good people who gave deeply of themselves so the rest of us could live. In a moment, we'll hear from Rabbi Daniel Kamen, whose personal experience of COVID touched so many of us. but we ask first that you hold those who are still ill in your hearts, as Happy Hoffman sings of healing and recovery.
May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
It all started with an email. A teacher in our preschool had tested positive for COVID-19. My children were not in her care. To the very best of my ability, I could not recall any close contact which had occurred between myself and that individual. In fact, I was sure of it. However, I found myself getting nervous about risk and exposure. So even though I was exhibiting no symptoms, I left the office a little bit early and swung by a testing facility as a precautionary measure. I was confident that I'd be fine. I just thought for good measure it was worth being sure of things. Not long after that poke of a nasal swab, I started to feel a slight headache. And I began to worry something was off. But it proceeded with my evening as usual. Family dinner and bedtime. My youngest daughter was just 3 months old, and the holiday season had just completed. So being tired was a sort of default setting. I remember sitting at my desk that first evening feeling a slight cough. Was it wet? Was it dry? I was concerned but comforted, knowing I would soon have the results of that precautionary test. My cough had become slightly more intermediate by the morning, but I was not feeling all that bad. It all felt connected to that standard form of exhaustion, and I was sure things would clear up soon enough. I worked from home and made dinner. Again, I wasn't feeling great, but not terrible either. Late in the day, I began to worry that it was indeed a case of COVID-19. My test results were not back, but the cough and slight fever felt all too textbook. I remember not being able to sleep that night. Compulsively, I refreshed the email app on my phone, waiting to confirm what I sensed to be true. Finally, just after midnight, the results were in, and my symptoms indeed were COVID-19. I could barely sleep the rest of the night. I felt as though I had done something wrong. After months and months of hand washing and mask wearing, after celebrating holidays in isolation and leading prayer through a Zoom screen, I was now part of the problem. And I worried that I too would be a vector. I spent hours that evening retracing my interactions over the past several weeks. Where had I gone and who had I interacted with? Did I spread this disease on to another? How did I get it? It all felt like a mystery. I drafted an email and zipped it off to everyone I had seen in person over the past several weeks, 32 individuals in total. All outside, all socially distant, or following the precautions and protocols and guidance widely practiced at that time. I felt shame and worry. But as far as my symptoms went, this didn't feel that bad. And so I began to resign myself to what was ahead. By 7:30 a.m., the first hero of my journey emerged. And it came in the form of a text message from Dr. Jan Feiner. She was not on my close contacts list, but had gotten wind of my situation nearly instantaneously. I wanted to see if there was any way I could help. And help she did throughout my journey. After a quick phone consultation, we decided to pursue a drug protocol that she had seen work for others. I wasn't feeling that bad, but I figured better safe than sorry. So by the afternoon, the meds had arrived, and I found myself trying to settle into quarantine. Perhaps this wouldn't be so bad. I can practice guitar and read some books. I'll certainly be able to work from home. I rested and ate well. By the following day, I felt strong enough to make it to my desk. I was teaching a class at the time, and I figured it better to press forward than to let the virus disrupt things. I wasn't 100%, but felt strong enough to teach and answer questions through the intermediary of a Zoom screen. By noon, I was done, and it was back to rest. And it was then I noticed my symptoms worsening. Back pain. It turns out back pain was my presenting issue. And it quickly became painful, too painful to navigate my way around the house. My fever spiked and my oxygen saturation began to lower. My cough had subsided, but I fear the damage had already begun. Another phone consultation with Dr. Feiner and my next steps were clear. She wanted me at the hospital to monitor my situation. Just after 9 p.m., the ambulance arrived. I met the paramedics at the front door. My vitals weren't terrible, but undoubtedly worthy of attention, and I figured it better to be safe than sorry, so the next step was St. Francis Hospital. I don't remember much of that first hospital stay. It was a matter of several days, and while the pain was worrisome, my COVID symptoms felt secondary. Midnight trips to the MRI machine and investigative procedures to understand what was going on, but my respiratory illness did not seem to be the presenting issue. I felt loved and cared for by so many. As it happens, I know quite a few doctors and nurses who work at St. Francis Hospital, and I remember one of my caregivers being puzzled as to why I had so many people checking in, streaming through my room. I tried to explain the rabbi thing, but I don't think she fully understood. All things being equal, it was a quiet few days, and I was eager to get home. Rachel was all alone caring for our 2 young daughters, and she had now been diagnosed with COVID-19 as well. That meant no babysitters, no visitors, no help at all. I figured it better for me to be home, and we could share the load. A ride was arranged, and I was discharged. I felt as though the worst was behind me. Some pain medicine would help me navigate my discomfort, but I would soon be back on my feet. When I got home, I went straight to bed, feeling like I needed to rest up from the hospital stay. I was no longer significantly concerned about my symptoms and just felt as though I needed sleep. And sleep, indeed, I needed. Over the next 3 days, I barely left the bed. I slept for hours and hours in a feverish haze, unsure of if I was getting worse or better. By day 4, Rachel was concerned, and although we had stopped religiously tracking my oxygen, we started again. And we noticed things were just not getting any better. That night, Dr. Feiner called to check in. My vitals once again brought her concern. She came over and confirmed I needed to return to the hospital. But still exhausted, I asked if I could stay home just one more night. The answer was no. I needed next-level care immediately. I went back to the ambulance in St. Francis Hospital, this time more aware of what would unfold. The paramedics were more serious this time. It's funny to say it now, but I felt surprised that they were administering emergency care. Inside, I felt stable, but they saw something else. It was at this point I was put on supplementary oxygen, a companion that would stay with me for many weeks to come. I was lucky. All of this unfolded in early November. On the day of my first hospital stay, they announced a vaccine that would come to save us all, a welcome relief from the fog and the haze. And it was still several weeks before the winter surge pushed our hospitals to their brink, or shall I say, to their then brink. But supplementary oxygen didn't seem to be doing the trick for me, and as beeps and alarms surrounded, they kept upping my care. From the inside, I didn't necessarily feel worse, but clearly things were not going as they should. This time, my stay was lonely. I had been sick for over a week. My body was hurting from pokes and prods, and now I was being told I had to lie in a prone position. Progressively, my oxygen masks got more and more sophisticated, and I didn't quite understand how serious things were. I could no longer rest. I could no longer feel comfortable. I felt as though I was fighting, but very little was in my control. The first 24 hours of that second hospital stay coincided with a SpaceX mission to the International Space Station. I remember watching the live stream of that mission from my hospital bed. I figured if those 4 astronauts could confine themselves into a tiny space for a period of time, then I too could find the strength to remain in an uncomfortable position for a length of time, undetermined but necessary. People called and texted. Fewer people stopped by this time. But all in all, it felt heavier and more serious. I slowly came to grips with the damage that was being done. This virus was trying to defeat me. But I just wanted to go home to my family. When the people started talking about experimental treatments and still more invasive interventions, I got worried. Would things get worse before they got better? Time slowed and sped up at the very same time. There was not much to do, but there was plenty of concern. I still didn't know. Was I worse or better? I felt as though my days became regular in a way. I knew the vitals that the doctors were tracking, and I felt determined to do my part. Eventually, and I'm not exactly sure at what moment, things started to spiral less. My oxygen saturation stopped dropping and breathing became a little bit easier. Finally, after almost another week, I was stable and steady. I was cleared to return home. I was equally optimistic this time, but the journey ahead felt more evident and daunting. I would be on oxygen for the foreseeable future, and mobility would take some time to return. But I was happy to be able to see my wife and children again. I felt grateful to be on the other side of a second hospital stay. It took weeks to feel like myself again. Brain fog set in and the need for physical therapy was real. After that, I've never felt weaker. But gradually my strength has returned. I tried to take my time re-engaging with the world, and steadily I was able to return to normal activities. And only then was I able to comprehend what I had been through, the trauma, the exhaustion, the seriousness of it all. It was a heroic effort to walk my family and me through this journey. It was a journey full of heroes all along the way. We are the lucky ones. I am a survivor. I avoided the ventilator. I was sick at a time when hospitals had capacity. My illness came after hospitals had experience treating cases like my own, and I was lucky because I was surrounded by a loving and extraordinary community. The heroes who got us through are too numerous for me to name individually, but we will do so as a community. Meals nourished us, toys brought my children joy, and a cascade of messages let me feel strong in ways I never knew was possible. Today, the pandemic rages on. Hospitals are fuller than ever. Heroes have given their all to keep us going, and yet a break does not seem in sight. I share my story in these details as a record of where we've been and to demonstrate what all of this looks like from the inside out. I am just one of so many who have suffered. I am lucky in countless ways. I lived to tell this story. And I speak a message of personal gratitude, recognition for all that we have been through, acknowledgement of what still lies ahead, love and appreciation for all our COVID heroes.
Before there were vaccines and effective medications, many people lost their lives. The unforgivable fact is that over 600,000 are dead, and that includes only those who died in this country. Nearly 4.5 million have been erased from the living worldwide. I ask that you now join us in El Malei Rachamim, followed by Kaddish, the essential prayer for the dead.
שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום, לברכה שלחו לעולמם. בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם. ינוחו בשלום על משפחותיכם, ונאמר
El Malei Rachamim, exalted and compassionate God, grant perfect rest beneath the wings of Shekhinah to all those whose lives have been lost to COVID-19, together with the souls of all the holy and pure whose light shines brightly and eternally. Keep them in the shelter of your wings forever. May their souls be bound up in the bonds of life. May they rest in peace, and may their memory forever be for us a blessing. Let us all say, Amen. We continue now with the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah, me'amad yivrach yilutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam lo me'almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha brichu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'miran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim, Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
We mourn those who are no longer alive, but now we are ready to salute the living. In the courtyard of the synagogue, there will soon be a permanent plaque, surrounded by greenery and seasonal blossoms. It is a place for quiet reflection and gratitude out in the air which disperses the grief, open to the sky and hope and optimism. We wanted very much to bear witness as a congregation to the fact that many people have risked their health and well-being to protect the rest of us from the dangers of the pandemic. The plaque will stand as a permanent witness to the essential truths of the period of this plague. There are heroes in every community on the planet who raised the bar for moral excellence, ready willingness, and personal courage. With all of them in mind, we say these words. With abundant faith, the Synagogue family records its hope that the pandemic which began in the winter of 2020 will ease, and that fear and despair will ease and give way to hope and security. We mourn the dead who have been taken from us and pray that their memory will endure. We ask the blessings of science continue to protect us and every citizen in the world be preserved in health. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. We salute with valor our community's physicians, nurses, and medical personnel. together with researchers, public servants, mental health professionals, and educators, frontline workers in every field. Their bravery and willingness to serve the public good made it possible for us to endure during this chaos and disorder of international crisis.
We now continue with a scroll of honor. Over the last several months, many people have written or called the Synagogue to ask their COVID heroes be honored in this ceremony. We have compiled that list and also held it open so that you can make your own contributions to our salute. Just find your way to the Synagogue website, submit your additions, and we'll be sure to incorporate them on the official roster. In the meantime, we ask you to honor these good people.
Many thanks to all of these good people and to all of you for participating in this salute. We believe in the power of gratitude and appreciation as a way of building community and moral strength. Over the next several months, we hope that many of our friends will come by the synagogue to view our plaque and experience our courtyard as a place of optimism. We hope that the pandemic is soon brought to an end and that we will all be released from the grip of care and worry. To all of this, we say, Amen, Amen.